Alright, let's talk about sharpening. The single most important thing I can share with you, and you don't have to go very far to find somebody that's had a nice quality shear trashed by somebody that didn't know what they were doing. And you can do it so easy. Hair grows back, except for people like me. I've been bald-headed for a long time. But steel doesn't. Okay, once it's gone, the damage is done. You got to live with it. Most often we can repair the shears to make them cut pretty good for you, but for the most part, when they're damaged, they're damaged. Okay, and you need to understand all that glitters is not gold. Okay, just like you understand what corrective color is. I do a tremendous amount of corrective sharpening. Same thing, just different application. Okay, the most often asked question I get is, how often should I sharpen my shears? I know a lot of shear manufacturers that will recommend between 700 and 900 haircuts. Well, if you do 10 haircuts a day, 5 days a week, that's 50. In 10 weeks, you got 500. So you're looking every 3 to 4 months. I think for the average person, that's probably a little much. But let me give you the best answer I can with that, because there's a lot of things come into play when you talk about longevity. First off, what kind of steel's in it? And then how well is the shear tempered? They say temper at the most critical moment brings out the very best in steel and the very worst in people. Well, all shears have to be tempered. Some of the cheaper shears you may see written on the blade here, we might say ice or ice tempered or whatever. Ice is not a brand name. It is a tempering process. They take the shears, they heat it up to cherry red, they quench it in oil, and then they put it in dry ice, which takes it down like 150 below zero. I have seen very, very rarely computer vacuum tempered or vacuum tempering on the blades. They do basically the same thing, but instead of when they quench it in oil, they put it in liquid nitrogen, takes it down like 300 plus below zero, and then they slowly warm the metal back up. It's kind of a lengthy, drawn-out process, but the better the shear is tempered, the better it's going to hold up. And then with longevity, do you have flat angles that are real durable? We talked about that and how they're made. Or do you have shears that are real steep? The steeper the angle, they're a higher maintenance shear, and they take a little more frequent servicing. Okay, and then what are your personal habits? Do you do 10 haircuts a day or 20? Thick hair or thin? Is it always clean, sometimes dirty? Is the hair always wet, or is it sometimes dry? Do you drop them on the floor? Do you cut rings and combs? While in the other section about care and maintenance, do you lay them down open on a hard surface? Do you throw them in a bucket or someplace with other shears, with other things? All these things come into play. Now, the thing I just tell people, the bottom line is, you do it when they need it. Well, how do you know when they need it? Let me show you. Let me share with you a very simple test for sharpness. You'll know exactly how to test them. You'll know exactly when they need services, and this won't harm your shears at all. I had a different test, and when I went to Japan the first time for training, they were using a Kleenex brand tissue. Now I found some Kleenex are 3-ply, some are 2-ply, but you peel them off and you take 1-ply of a Kleenex brand tissue. Can you use other brands? I don't know, but I do know the Kleenex works and it does not harm your shear. They're nice and soft, and some are a little bit rougher than other ones. But here's how you know when they need it. Okay, I put a Kleenex on with a dark background so you can see it a little bit better. And you take your water bottle and you wet it. You don't have to drown it, just make sure it's good saturated. Make sure your tension is not loose, but remember, a loose screw will cause a hair to flip over or scoot down the blade. So make sure, first thing you do is you clean them and you make sure they don't slam shut. And this shear should go right through there without any problems. If you can see that. Nice and clean cut. Now this shear's got a flaw in it. And I'm kind of glad I have one like this that's got a flaw so I can show you. Something got bumped with it or whatever. And if you can see that, it cuts at the tip, but not in the middle. Right there. cuts a little bit down here but doesn't cut. The shear, the tissue will pull. Sometimes it'll cut it through, but it'll leave little fibers stick out. And usually you can tell which blade of the problem is, or which side the fiber's on. So when you test that, you cut into it with your shears, and if there's a flaw in the blade, it will show it to you. You'll know it. There will be no doubt in your mind whatsoever where you're at. Now, you get a brand new shear, you get them properly serviced where they cut good, they'll go right through the tissue, and you lay them down on a hard counter, boom, there goes your edge. Okay, then they're not going to cut good. Drop them on the floor, same thing. Lots of potential for damaging your shears. When I went to Japan 2 years ago, this was in November of 2007, I went into the factory, and the guy there was going to teach me some stuff. He took a shear and threw them down on the hard concrete floor. And I'm going to guess, the scissor was so brand new, they didn't even have a name on them yet. Very, very fine shear. I'm going to guess around a $600 pair of shears. Threw them down a second time, and that didn't work. He threw them down a third time. He still wasn't happy with them. So he picked the shears up, took a screwdriver, and started beating on the blades. Both of them, like that. I thought the guy wigged out. I thought he was going nuts on me. I was looking for the door. They handed the shears to me. Well, they were just rough as a corn cob. And I could have fixed that. That wouldn't have been a problem. But he wanted to show me how they did it. He took the shears apart and worked them over. Didn't take any metal off the shears, other than only stonework. And in just a few minutes, you could shave with them, and they were just smooth as glass. Needless to say, he had my undivided attention, because that was something very, very important. Okay, so when you get somebody sharpens a shear, let me explain some things that's going to happen here with improper sharpening, and maybe this will make sense to you. Okay, when you've got a hamaguri edge, has a very steep edge angle on it, your edge is going to be something like that. Very, very steep. I got the shear like this. I'm going to hold this like at this angle, and that's what we're looking at right here, down this outside edge here. Somebody comes along and sharpens this wrong, they're going to put an angle like this, across like that. Now, when that metal is removed, now your blade looks something like that. You don't have a nice hamaguri edge anymore. Instead of having a shear with an angle like this, you've got one like this. Now that's not all of the problem, because when you go to sharpen this thing, let me get around here, if it's a very small bevel that they put on here, right here on this edge, if they put a very small bevel, a lot of times I can take that out, but a lot of times I can't, because to put this proper angle back on here, all this metal here has to be removed. Look how much metal they've removed from the blade. All of a sudden, they've taken off 25–30% of the life of your shear. Now, a lot of times if somebody puts a bevel on it, I can't put it back. Hair goes back, steel doesn't. So we're kind of stuck with what we've got. So I've got to maintain that same angle they've got here when I sharpen. And I can usually get a pretty decent edge on a shear after it's been trashed. It makes me sick when I see a nice high-dollar scissor that's been done this way, because it just makes me want to cry.